Seconds, so you can count down Mom the recording. And Momik is sending out last week's recording immediately, soon. So slight backlog because we were moving offices, but he's on top of it. Okay, we're underway. Welcome aboard, everybody. It's our LGFG call once again. But people sometimes outside of LGFG listen in. So you're hearing some of the secret leadership stuff, which is available in bookstores because we're studying Developing the Leader Within You 2.0. Right. So we've talked already about the first couple chapters. We have talked about influence, that leadership is in fact influence. And people say, well, I'm not really a leader. Well, yeah, but you need to be an influencer no matter what you're doing, maybe not even your career. As a parent, you've got to be a leader. You've got to influence, right? So, second chapter was all about priorities. And hopefully, you had a chance to think about margin. That was one of our topics last week. Creating margin in your life so that you can be balanced. And you don't have to just do one thing all the time, 24 hours a day. Woo! So, creating margin is real important, because balance is a useful thing. So now that leads us to the third chapter, which is all about character. And we're going to divide this one up because as I read through this chapter, how many of you have the book? 1, 2, 3. Okay, so a few of you are following along. I will kind of summarize as we go, but this needs to be broken up because this is a really important key to leadership. Character. So if you're taking notes, and you're going to probably take a few today, because I've got a big list to go through. Write down character. Now, one quote that I like, there's a book that came out some years ago, which is not in the book, so don't start flipping pages and looking for this. But there was a book that came out called Execution, and that was not about the death penalty. It was a book about how to hit your goals, how to do what you want to do, corporately and individually. And the author that wrote that, Richard Biggs, said this: the greatest gap in life is the one between knowing and doing. Isn't that true? The greatest gap in life is the difference between knowing and doing. I mean, have you ever known somebody that knows everything? I mean, they are pretty knowledgeable, but they haven't done anything. I know people that went to graduate school for years and years, got multiple degrees, and they enjoy learning and they're curious people. That's great, but knowing is one thing, but then applying it is something else. So this book was all about execution. The fact that companies have a big problem because they have so many great ideas, but they have very little good follow through on those ideas. So we're going to talk a little bit about that under the heading of character. So life would certainly be a lot easier, and success would be more simple if all it took to achieve was to know the right things, right? You could just read a book. You could just read a book about golf and then say, all right, give me some clubs. I'm going to go out and make it happen. And you would look like an idiot on the course, which I've done several times. So knowing is not really the key. And one aspect, there's knowing, and there's also deciding to do those things, right? So if all it took was to achieve was to know something and then decide to do them, that would be a simple process. But it's probably more accurate to say that a decision is just one bookend. That's why I'm doing my hands like this. These are bookends. Decisions are one bookend of achievement. The other is discipline. And I used to hate that word, like, no, not discipline. I hate discipline. I like to just free spirit, do what I want when I want to, and it just doesn't work real well. So just like a few weeks ago when we were talking in our semi-annual meeting about goals and planning, all that good stuff, those were decisions that you made about what kind of year you wanted to have, right? So those decisions kind of help us start, but discipline or character helps us finish. That's where character comes in. Emotion might drive us to make a decision. You might look around the room and say, okay, this year I'm going to beat Eustace. Or this year, you know what? Jorn, you're going down. Jorgen, you might make those kind of decisions under some sort of emotional, yeah, at a meeting, and that's fine. But discipline and character is what keeps us going when it's not going well. All right. I heard a story at church this weekend from a friend of mine whose son I'll give you the short version of it. But his son, who's only about 5'4", small guy, came to church in a dress army uniform. And he's still in high school. But the thing is, this summer, he went to boot camp in the Army. Now, boot camp, if you don't know what that is, it's a way that when you join the Army that they determine whatever your weaknesses and flaws are and exploit them. And so you are just lower than, they make you feel like dirt. They break you down so that you'll become part of the unit. Well, anyway, this kid named Drew, my friend Jeff, his son Drew, came to church, and he told a story in our class about Drew, how he was the smallest, puniest, slowest, and weakest young soldier in that platoon. And they worked on him, and he just did not quit. He was tougher than nails. And at the end, one of the commanders brought him in and said, "Schulte," and I'll use the actual language. He said, "You're a piece of shit." He goes, "Aye, sir. Yes, sir." He said, he goes, "You're the slowest person I've ever seen." He goes, "Aye, sir." And he was just at attention, He's like, "You're the smallest person we've ever had." He's like, "Aye, sir." He said, you barely finished this." He goes, "Aye, sir." He goes, "But you know what? I like you." He goes, "Aye, sir. And I would love to have you in my platoon. Do you know why, Schulte?" And the kid said, "No, sir." He said, "Because you have heart and you don't quit." He said, "Aye, sir." And then he said, "Now you're still a piece of shit." But he was, his father, if you knew this kid, he was really proud of him. He had a picture of him and everything. So I got to meet him. Great kid. But character was so much more important than speed, size, strength, intelligence, etc. And that has a lot to do with what you're doing too. So some of you are kind of in LGFG boot camp, and you're being broken down, and that's okay. You're going to make it. But there's two types of people that Maxwell talks about. He says there are character-driven people, and so I'm going to kind of list the differences between character-driven people and emotion-driven people. Two different approaches to life. Character-driven people do right, and then they feel good. So, if you're trying to write all this down, you can just get the idea. On the emotional side, emotion-driven people feel good, and then they do it right. You see, it's opposite. Character-driven people, they are commitment-driven. They make a commitment. They're like, okay, I'm there. You know a lot of people who are emotion-driven or convenience-driven. That's probably better. Convenience-driven. You know people that are like water. I knew people in sales that were like water. They quit. They always just took the path of least resistance, whatever was the most convenient. And then they never kind of got where they wanted to go. Number 3, here's another one. Character-driven people are principle-based. They make principle-based decisions. And emotion-driven people, as you can imagine, they make popular decisions. They're like, what's everybody else doing? Some of you, when you joined LGFG, you had skeptics that said, you are crazy to do sales, or you're crazy to work in a call center. That's how, it's because everybody, they're like, no one does that. But convenience-driven people say, well, what's everybody else doing? I'll just do that. I won't step out on a limb and be different. So you made a principle-based decision. That's cool. Okay, character-driven people let action control their attitude. And the opposite, emotion-driven people let their attitude control their actions. They're upset, they're angry, I don't feel like working. Or they get pissed off at a client. Not a good thing. So think about that. All right. Character-driven people believe it in their mind, and then they see it. Emotion-driven people have to see it first, then they'll believe it. Okay? Especially when it comes to goals. All right, here's another one. Character-driven people create momentum. And emotion-driven people wait for momentum. You know, when everybody else is getting fired up, okay, I guess I will too. And everybody else is selling well, oh, well, I guess I better catch up. There were so many people that I used to work with that just said, you know, I just don't feel like selling. I just don't want to. And I'm like, well, what does that have to do with it? The question is, what should you do? That was always my question to people. They're like, I don't feel like it. I'm like, so? That's ridiculous. What does that have to do with anything? Okay, keep going before I get negative. Character-driven people say this. They say, what are my responsibilities? That's their question. And emotion-driven people, the takers, say, well, what are my rights? What are my rights? What does the company owe me? Okay? Couple more. Don't worry. We're almost done with this list. I got another one that's longer, so be ready. Character-driven people continue when problems come up. And as you can imagine, emotion-driven people quit when problems hit. Character-driven people are steady. Emotion-driven people are moody. All right. So typically, character-driven people are leaders, and emotion-driven people, as you can guess, are followers. So that's something to kind of think about. Now, as we went down that list, hopefully you were identifying mostly with the first group, right? And you were being character-driven or learning how to do that. Now, I'm going to flip over. If you've got your book handy, I'm actually going to go through most of these items on page 50. Let me set this up. Maxwell highlights one author who writes articles for the Harvard Business Review. And this guy had a chance to sit down with Pope Francis, as Maxwell did later on, but he sat down with Pope Francis, the head of the Catholic Church, who has known hundreds of leaders, good, bad, indifferent, down through the years. And he said that there were obviously problems that were part of leadership. And we're going to spend, when we get through this book, I've been reading some really interesting stuff on the dark side of leadership, what they call shadow leadership. Ooh. So we're going to delve into that, maybe around Halloween. That would be good. But anyway, this dark side comes up, and the Pope outlined 15 leadership diseases. He called them diseases. So as you grow in influence and leadership, sometimes you might fall into one of these pitfalls or develop one of these diseases. So let me kind of go through them, and then I'll open it up and see if you have any questions. And these are kind of, these are different, so just bear with me. Okay, the first disease he says that leaders can fall into is thinking that we're immortal or indispensable. I am immortal, which means I'm pretty self-absorbed, or I'm indispensable. The company could never fire me because I'm so useful. Well, that thought process is the enemy of service, and that's not cool. That causes problems. All right, second thing he said, a disease, was excessive busyness. Busyness. What does that lead to? Stress. It leads to agitation. So if you're just, I mean, some of you guys who just joined the company, then I want you to be busy. You need to do the grind. You need to do all that stuff. And I'm saying, veterans, you don't need to be busy, but this is excessive busyness. This is like having every minute planned out, got to do it. And if something goes wrong, you've got no margin. You're just very highly structured, which will come up in a minute. But just being busy, activity does not equal results, by the way. So you may have known some people who are like super active, but they don't get much done. Okay, that's what we're talking about. All right, third one. Mental and emotional, he calls it petrification. They're petrified mentally and emotionally. And he says that creates heartlessness. If you're ossified, if you're petrified, if you're fossilized, well, I'm using all the words pertaining to dinosaurs. That's really good. That can make you rigid and heartless and ungenerous toward others. So ponder that. All right, number 4. And this list that I'm going through, this would be cool to kind of kick around in your discussion groups when we're finished. Fourth thing, the pontiff said was a disease, was excessive planning excessive planning, which leads to inflexibility. Now, most of you probably need to plan more, so be careful with this one. But you can get to a point where your life is so planned out and everything's in a box, everything's like got to have a tick mark by it, check, 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 did that you can get seriously inflexible. So don't overdo it. Leave some time for margin. There you go. All right, number 5, poor coordination. Poor coordination with others. And that just means you're going to end up, if you don't coordinate well, having a lack of cooperation. We've seen that you've probably been in organizations where there was just poor coordination between different teams or the home office, and things went poorly. So you got to coordinate well. That's a disease in leadership. Now here's a weird one. The 6th one, if you're keeping score, leadership Alzheimer's. Leadership Alzheimer's. ALZHEIMERS. Okay, everybody knows what Alzheimer's is. That's where you kind of start to lose it mentally. You forget. Well, this is where leaders forget who mentored them, who nurtured them. These are people who just say, I'm a success. I'm a self-made person. I did it by myself. I, me, my. Like the Beatles song. I, me, my. Right? They're all about themselves, and they've forgotten how that they've stood on others' shoulders to get where they are. All right. See, some of these, you're going, well, that doesn't even apply to me. I'm not even in a position that whatever. But they will as you grow. So you go ahead and pay attention. 7 is rivalry and pride. Rivalry and pride. These are people where titles become the leader's primary focus. Have you known someone like that who likes to throw that? We talked about this in the very first recording of Developing the Leader Within 2.0. We talked about the levels of leadership, and the first level was position. And sometimes when people get a position and they got a title and they're supposed to manage others, then they kind of lord that over them. So that's not cool. That's just, pride is not fun. All right, here's another one that's kind of a mouthful. Number 8, existential schizophrenia. I'm sorry, I didn't write this. Existential schizophrenia. What does that mean? That's where leaders lead hypocritical, double lives. If you've seen people in the news who are powerful, strong leaders, whether they're coaches, whether they're people in the church, and they lead a double life. On the outside, they look like, whoa, they've got their game together. And then on the news, you find out, oh my gosh, they have fallen incredibly. They made horrible errors in judgment, right? You've heard about that. I mean, it's not good. And so I would put a little star by that. As you grow in leadership, any leadership position, there's a certain amount of control that you exert over other people. And sometimes you can really develop this kind of split personality, where on one hand, you have an image that you project to the world, but on the other side, internally, which is what we're talking about, character-wise, you can be seriously messed up. More on that later. That's a good one. All right, here's number 9. You might hear this and go, well, that's not much of a disease. Number 9 is gossiping, grumbling, backbiting. Gossiping, grumbling, backbiting. This is where cowardly leaders speak badly of others behind their back. Okay? Now, the Bible says that the tongue is a fire, you know? And although it's like the rudder of a ship, and although the rudder is a really small part of a ship that sails, it determines the course and the direction of that entire boat or ocean liner, right? So we have to control our tongues. This is really hard. This is one where I really fell down a lot, especially early on, because I was good at just cutting people to ribbons with some of the things I said about them. Now, did I say it to their face? Not often. Did I say it behind their back? Remember when Covey talked about how fun that, not fun, but how it's kind of affirming when you get with somebody else and you pick on somebody behind their back, you go, hey, you know, so-and-so is really a jerk. Oh yeah, he sure is. Well, you know what I heard? Oh yeah. And so it's kind of, it builds a little bit of connection between the two of you. But what's the problem with gossiping and backbiting and grumbling is that when you leave, what does this, your partner think? Well, I wonder if he's saying that about me, right? So Covey talked about this. If you were on our broadcast with Stephen Covey, he said, it's so important to have loyalty to the absent. Remember? Loyalty to those who are absent. So hard to do, especially when you disagree with them, but important. So that's what we're talking about. That one you ought to talk about as a group, number 9. Because if you get upset with somebody, go talk to them, even though it's scary, you know? It's a good idea. All right, 10. Got a few more here. Now this is sort of the opposite. Idolizing superiors. Idolizing superiors. This is where leaders honor their superiors to gain favor, to get ahead. In the States, we call that brown nosing. Does everybody know what brown nosing is? Yeah, everybody. Okay. It means you're very much involved with the other person. Your nose is in a bad place because you're willing to kiss their butt, okay, to get ahead. So there you go. I told you what it was about. So you don't want to idolize superiors. You know what you find out is they're just like you. They're just further along the path in the management hierarchy, but they've got problems just like you. So no reason to idolize. All right. Here's the next one. Indifference to others. Indifference to others. This is where leaders just think about themselves. That's an obvious one. Indifference. You just think of yourself. Number 12 sounds a little bit different, but it was downcast faces. Downcast faces. Let me read what it says. This is where leaders treat the people beneath them, their inferiors, that's in quotes, inferiors, with severity. They're too rough on the people that report to them. And it causes downcast people are not happy. Okay. Couple more. Hoarding. H-O-A-R-D. Hoarding. Which involves accumulating material goods to seek security. So that's the person that just thinks more is better. And I'm not saying that you should live a life of poverty and then that you will be all balanced and spiritual, but I'm saying this, all you do is you think, well, I've got to have that motorcycle to be happy, or I've got to travel to this many cities in order to be fulfilled, or I've got to have this kind of home. And as you hit those and you keep accumulating stuff, if that becomes the central focus, that's what I would call an idol, I-D-O-L, right? Because it has taken your first love away. So nothing wrong with making money at all, but when you think more about your money than you should, it owns you. So ponder hoarding. We even have a show here in America called Hoarders. Have you ever seen that? Do you know what I'm talking about? Horrible. Really, it's scary. People just living in piles of stuff that they've accumulated. And that's an entirely different mental condition than what we're talking about. Okay, last one. Extravagance. The Pope said extravagance and self-exhibition, where leaders seek greater power and recognition. More power, more recognition, more and more. Okay? And the 3 levels of, I would say, that people attain to, I don't know if this would be like 3 greed levels or I forgot what I would call this, but first people want more, then they want better, then they want different. This is not in Maxwell's book. This is all just bonus material because I'm full of knowledge. So the first thing you do when you don't have much is you want more. You're like, well, I want a little more of this, a little more of that. That's fine. Then if you have more, you go, I need better stuff, okay? I have a nice little stereo here, but I want a nice sound system, right? Okay, at home entertainment. And then if you get that, you look around and you go, I got to get something that's seriously different. you know, wireless stuff built into the ceiling with lights because I got to be different than everybody else. So, which is what I have, by the way, if you ever come to my house. Okay, not really. All right, let me wrap up with a few thoughts. And you should be having thoughts at this point because this is a good list to make you think about. Maxwell says this: the reality is that leading ourselves is the most difficult task we face every day. It's almost easier to lead others or tell them what to do, but leading yourself is a real challenge. I hope you found that. Here's another thing he said that really resonated with me. This would be one to write down. I like this. He said, I want to improve my character, not because it gets me what I want, but because it helps me to be what I want. Oh, grasshopper. Let me repeat that. I want to improve my character not because it gets me what I want, but because it helps me to be what I want. When I was younger at Southwestern, every year they would ask you to come back and be in the program once again because it was a summer program. So they would always say, well, you know, you should do this again. And you know, people ask me, are you going to do this again? You've worked for 3 or 4 years in the program. And I was like, I think so. And they go, why? And I said, I don't know. And they go, well, what are you going to do with your life? And I'd say, I have no idea what I want to do with my life. But I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew what kind of person I wanted to be. That's kind of what Maxwell's saying. That's why I kept coming back, because I thought that was good for me. You know, you see the difference? I didn't know what career path I wanted to take when I was 22, but I knew what kind of person I wanted to be. I knew what kind of character I wanted to have, and that's why I stayed in that sales program. That's why I'd encourage you to stay at LGFG, because it's hard, and it's a challenge, and it's good for you, and it makes you grow, and it sucks a lot of times. And so that's how you develop. You know, that helps you be the person you want to be, developing grit. Okay? So 2 more thoughts. He says this too. I like this. Having good character does not ensure that you'll be successful. If you have good character, that does not ensure that you're going to be successful in life. But you can be sure, he says, that having poor character will eventually derail you personally and professionally. Right? So being a good, solid, character-driven person doesn't mean you're going to be independently wealthy. But if you, here's the deal. Be sure that if you have a crappy character, it will derail you personally. It will mess up your family. It'll destroy your relationships. You will hurt in the professional world. Okay. So now that I may have discouraged you, I'll leave you with one more thought, and then I'll open it up to see if you have any questions or thoughts, which is fine with me. He said this, somewhere around page 51. I don't know. He said, though you cannot go back and make a brand new start, anyone can start from now and make a brand new end. So some of you are beating yourself up because you've had a slow start or a slow month or things aren't going like you planned. You can't go back and make a brand new start, but anybody can start from now, from today, from this week, and make a brand new end. So pick up where we've left you. Okay? Good. Thoughts, input, unmutes? Anybody? Stories? Tales of victory or loss? Did this make sense? Nod your head. Yes. Good. Well, this is just, I know for a Monday, some of you are just starting today. Oh, it's not Monday. It's Tuesday where some of you are. Well, some of you, it's even Monday evening. Wherever you are, this is a heavy topic, but it's something that my job is, as a person that makes you a better leader, is to help you just briefly think about these things. So talk about them, discuss it with your office mates, whenever you can, and we'll move forward. Next week, we're going to talk about character because this chapter gets even deeper. So strap on, and we will see you again. Okay? Okay. Have a pleasant week, and I will leave you with more Todd Rundgren. See ya. Oh. Gosh, wait a minute. Is your hand raised? Tisa, or are you just stretching? Okay, goodbye. Okay, never mind. Enjoy the music.